All right, guys. So finishing off our discussion on learning, looking into some other factors, some other phenomena that have been observed by researching learning. So we have the concept of a cognitive map, which is your kind of mental picture of your place in your surrounding environment. So um, it's the parent teacher conference night. Um, and you have to explain to your parents how to get from one classroom to another, and you're just like, okay, so you go to room 5, and you walk down the hall, and you take a left, and then you see like the drinking fountain there, and then you go to like right down the next hall, and there's my room on the side, it's the second one on the left, and like how we can do that is our cognitive map. So it's this mental processes that we just this mental layout that we just have of our surrounding environment, that we can kind of use to navigate our kind of day-to-day world. Um, and latent learning is learning that occurs without your knowledge. So you have the specific things that you're focusing on, and then while this is also happening, people also will learn other behaviors and stuff without even really their knowledge of it, about the focus on it. So it's that kind of background acquisition of knowledge that's happening. Okay, so different motivations, and this is a really important aspect when talking about conditioning, classical operants. I guess mostly operant, um, and something, taking psychology and putting it into practical terms. Something to be aware of, like if you're when you're a parent possibly one day and you're trying to get your children um, to exhibit certain behaviors and so on. So intrinsic motivation is our internal desire. Okay, that we want to do this just because we want to do it. It's that internal, intrinsic inside. Um, I want to ace this test because I want to do it, because I have plans. It makes me feel good. Like I want to do it because I want to do it. Versus extrinsic motivation, which is I'm doing it for some sort of reward or to avoid a punishment. Okay. Um, I'm doing this because, if I pass this test, my dad will give me $5. Or if I fail this test, I'm going to be grounded for a week or whatever. Okay. Um, uh, Intrinsic motivation is always what we're looking for. Um, because intrinsic motivation is much more likely, if the behavior is intrinsically motivated, it's much more likely to happen continuously, and for extinction to not happen with that. Versus extrinsic motivation, as soon as you remove that reward or that threat of that punishment, goes away. That this kid gets good grades in high school because their parents are like always on them and like, man, we're gonna take away your stuff, we're gonna take away your phone, or whatever. But then they go to college and they're living in the dorms in a different state, and mommy and daddy aren't there to ground them anymore. And now that extrinsic motivation of like, man, I need to study for this test, or else I'm gonna get in trouble. All of a sudden, like, yeah, what are they gonna do? They're in another state. It's no big deal. I don't need to study for this anymore. And now that goes away. Okay, and that is one of the real problems and dangers of using rewards and stuff, because they can build that extrinsic motivation. Then as soon as that reward is taken away, now that behavior isn't going to happen anymore. So it's really tricky. Like there's no kind of magic bullet here of this is how you do it intrinsically or whatever. Um, it's just something to be aware of. When we're going through conditioning again, like as a parent, most likely is where you might kind of see this, and then learned helplessness. Eventually, if um, a person, again, schools a good example, if they continually um, um, do poorly on the test, do poorly on the test, do poorly on the test, and bad things happen because of that. Eventually, they'll just kind of give up. They'll just kind of surrender. Um, if the this observed in dogs, being electrocuted, being shocked in those like Skinner boxes and stuff. Eventually, they'll just surrender to it, and they'll not even move. They'll just take it because they learn to help us. Like they just kind of give up on it. So it's another really unfortunate phenomenon. Again, I see this as a teacher manifest in schools, especially by the time they get to me in high school or whatever, that they've struggled so much in school that now they're in like ninth grade and they're just like done. Like I'm tired of feeling bad about failing tests, so I just fail them and I just don't even care anymore. Okay, so for motivation's sake, to kind of understand those phenomenon, and then learning by observation. This is our Bandura. This is our Bobo the doll experiment. That this is really with children, but really with any organism, can watch the modeling of others and watch their actions and watch the consequences of those actions, and then possibly pick up on those and start to exhibit those behaviors themselves. Okay, so they pay attention to it, and then they retain it, they understand it, and then they reproduce that behavior. So they are sitting playing innocently, and they watch the guy beating up on Bobo the doll and using the hammer and stuff, and then the kids start to do the same thing. And of course, this is where we get into things like do violent video games make people violent, or just if a kid watches violent movies when they're 5, are they going to model that behavior? Are they going to see it like, oh, this is what's happening and what I'm watching? I'm going to go out and do this too. So some of the dangers of modeling that, and the answer specifically video games and movies, there's still a lot of debate on that effect, but that's a possible negative of exposing, again, children kind of specifically, but really anyone to violent things, or just, I guess, behaviors which are socially unacceptable, because they then might also start to exhibit those same behaviors as well. Okay, so there's some other factors to pay attention to in learning. So we're talking about behavioralism. We're talking about conditioning, classical operant. Make sure you know the difference between the two. Make sure you know what the difference between a reward and a punishment, positive and negative are. The different types of reinforcement schedules, and then these other factors involved in learning.